Episode 62, Poison, Polygamy, and Power, the Dark Winter of 1843. Welcome to the Hidden and Distorted History of the Church series, where we will be looking at the historical aspects of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons. In this series, I will try and inform those unaware of the true facts of Mormon history. Recap. Last week, Joseph Smith finally shoved D&C 132 in front of Emma, confronting her with his so-called revelation on plural marriage. Joseph buys her silence by deeding her a hefty sum of property, all of it meticulously recorded in William Clayton's journal. We expose Joseph and Emma's attempt to drag Jane Law into the web of spiritual wifery, while Joseph dangled promises of future church leadership before his son, Joseph III. Emma became the first woman to receive her endowment. This week, William Law begs Joseph Smith to end polygamy. Smith responds by marrying 15-year-old Nancy Maria Winchester. Brigham Young accuses Emma of trying to poison Joseph. Smith pushes for Nauvoo to break from Illinois. And yes, Joseph opens a bar in the Nauvoo Mansion while the word of wisdom hangs in the balance. Don't miss this explosive episode. Part 1. A Plea from Law. In October 1843, William Law, then serving as a counselor in Joseph Smith's first presidency, directly confronted Smith about his expanding and secretive practice of plural marriage. Law, outraged by what he saw as a flagrant betrayal of Christian morality and a dangerous corruption of church authority, begged Smith to put an end to the practice. This wasn't a minor dispute. It marked a decisive rupture in Law's loyalty and set the stage for his ultimate break from both Smith and the church. Though Law had long harbored discomfort with rumors of polygamy, his concern exploded into fury after learning about Joseph's covert marriages to the Lawrence sisters, and most disturbingly, to Lucy Walker, a teenage girl who had been living under Smith's roof. For Law, these unions weren't just ethically reprehensible, they were legally and morally indefensible, even by the loose standards of frontier Nauvoo. As Fawn Brodie explained in No Man Knows My History, William Law, a Canadian convert and a member of the First Presidency, was one of the few men in Nauvoo who dared to oppose the prophet openly. When he learned of the secret practice of polygamy, he was appalled and tried to persuade Joseph to abandon it. Failing in this, he broke with the church and became one of its most bitter enemies. Law would later recount how he pleaded with Smith to abandon the practice, warning him of the internal rot it was causing and the scandal it would bring upon the church. But Smith refused to budge, asserting instead that plural marriage was a divine command that could not be revoked. Richard Bushman corroborates the depth of the fracture in Rough Stone Rolling. William Law, Smith's second counselor in the First Presidency, became disillusioned with the prophet's introduction of plural marriage. Law's opposition culminated in the publication of the Nauvoo Expositor, which exposed the practice and led to the destruction of the press, a key event that precipitated Smith's arrest and death. This clash was more than a personal disagreement. It was a foundational crisis. Law's pleas were ignored, and from that point forward, the divide between him and Smith became irreparable. The contradiction between Joseph Smith's increasingly radical private doctrines and his carefully managed public persona had become impossible for Law, or many others, to reconcile. Determined to expose what he now saw as deception and abuse of power, William Law became the leading force behind the Nauvoo Expositor, the short-lived newspaper that laid bare Smith's secret doctrines, spiritual coercion, and political overreach. The Expositor wrote, "We are aware, however, that there are numerous reports touching the conduct of Joseph Smith and others, which have been extensively circulated and which have had a tendency to destroy the confidence of many in the integrity of the church. Among these is the doctrine of many gods, the plurality of wives, and other things which we deem to be untrue and of evil tendency." Smith, enraged by the public challenge, ordered the press destroyed, a reckless decision that ignited a firestorm. That act of authoritarian censorship set off the chain of events that led to his arrest, incarceration at Carthage jail, and ultimately his violent death at the hands of a mob. Part 2. From a marriage to a poisoning attempt. On November 2, 1843, Joseph Smith is believed to have taken 15-year-old Nancy Maria Winchester as one of his final plural wives. While some sources point to Fanny Young as the last, Nancy Maria Winchester remains one of the final and most controversial names on the list of Smith's secret marriages. Though her surname sometimes causes confusion, Nancy was not related to Brigham Young, despite Young appearing in some later records. Her inclusion on the list of Smith's plural wives is confirmed by Andrew Jensen and Orson Whitney, two independent sources who make a solid historical case for the union, even if Smith's defenders try to downplay or dispute it. As Todd Compton wrote in Sacred Loneliness, Nancy Maria must have married Joseph Smith at about this time. Our best evidence for the union is Andrew Jensen, who lists Maria Winchester as one of Smith's wives. In addition, Orson Whitney, the son of Nancy Maria's friend, Helen, also identified her as a Smith wife. These two witnesses, taken together, make a good case for Nancy as a plural spouse of Joseph. If so, she became his wife at the age of 14 or 15. This wasn't just a late addition to an evolving doctrine. It was a deliberate act at the height of growing public scrutiny and internal dissent. Nancy's age and the secrecy surrounding the marriage underscore the moral collapse at the core of Smith's private theology. After Smith's death, Nancy was passed into the household of Heber C. Kimball as a plural wife, just another teenage girl absorbed into the web of Nauvoo polygamy. Later, she would separate from Kimball and marry Amos George Arnold in 1865, with whom she had one child. Nancy Maria Winchester's ceiling represents more than just another name on Joseph Smith's disturbing marriage roster. It symbolizes how far he was willing to go, how young he was willing to reach, and how deeply he believed he was above the law. The claim that Emma Smith attempted to poison Joseph Smith on November 5, 1843, is not supported by contemporary sources or their own personal writings. Instead, it stems from a later recollection by Brigham Young, recorded decades after the events. This account forms part of the contentious and emotionally charged history between Emma and Joseph, particularly revolving around the issue of plural marriage. Brigham Young alleged that Sister Emma got so mad about Joseph's practicing plural marriage that she poisoned his coffee. He drank it and vomited so severely that his stomach was nearly turned inside out. This story is usually dated to November 5, 1843, and appears in 19th century retellings of the Nauvoo period. However, this narrative is secondhand at best. There is no record from Joseph Smith's journal or any contemporary document supporting the claim Emma was behind it. It is instead reported in later reminiscences, particularly by those loyal to Brigham Young following the schism after Joseph's death. Richard Lyman Bushman in Joseph Smith. Rough Stone Rolling addressed the poisoning rumor. The rumor of poisoning was never substantiated, but it fit the atmosphere of suspicion and emotional extremism that surrounded Joseph Smith at the time. The charges against him, whether of poisoning or other acts, were frequently made without evidence, reflecting the profound tensions of the period. What was clear was that Joseph Smith's life was marked by a constant struggle against rumors and accusations, many of which seemed designed to undermine his character and authority. While the poisoning allegation remains unproven, we do know that, according to Joseph Smith's own diary, he was severely ill on that day, experiencing vomiting and stomach pains. However, this does not definitively prove that Emma poisoned him, or does it? Joseph himself appeared to believe that he had been poisoned, as noted in his journal. Sunday, November 5, 1843. Rode out with my mother, was taken suddenly sick at the dinner table, went to the door and vomited. All dinner jaws dislocated and raised fresh blood, every symptom of poison. So, was Brigham Young's account accurate? Did Emma, frustrated with Joseph's behavior, attempt to poison him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Part 3. Petitions and Booze. In December 1843, Joseph Smith made an audacious and profoundly bold move. He submitted a petition to the U.S. Congress demanding that the city of Nauvoo, Illinois, be granted the status of an independent federal territory. This wasn't a simple request. It was a radical assertion of power that would have made Nauvoo a semi-autonomous enclave under direct federal jurisdiction, with sweeping powers that could fundamentally alter the balance of authority in the United States. Smith's petition was laced with extraordinary demands. Among the most audacious provisions was the proposal to grant Nauvoo the authority to call upon federal troops at will, as well as the inclusion of the Nauvoo Legion, Smith's personal militia, into the U.S. Army. This was no mere plea for municipal power. It was a declaration of sovereignty. This moment marks one of the most dramatic expressions of Joseph Smith's political ambitions, religious fervor, and growing paranoia. It underscores a man who had moved beyond his humble beginnings and was now envisioning nothing less than a theocratic governance, with himself at its head. His escalating fears about state-level threats to his leadership and the Latter-day Saint community were reflected in this daring proposal, a sign that Joseph Smith was no longer thinking in small, cautious terms. On December 1st, 1843, Joseph Smith's journal, penned by scribe Willard Richards, records a brief but revealing entry that pulls back the veil on Smith's personal lifestyle during the height of his ecclesiastical and civic power in Nauvoo. That morning, Porter Rockwell brought wine to the Nauvoo Mansion, where Smith drank a glass and shared it with others. Later, he took dinner in the mansion's bar room, with Rockwell tending bar. This entry, found in the Joseph Smith Papers, Journals, Volume 3, May 1843, June 1844, pp. 224-225, reveals more than casual hospitality. It affirms the normalization of drinking culture within the home of a man revered as a prophet. Far from a medicinal or sacramental context, this was plainly social consumption, conducted in a commercial setting. The bar inside the mansion house, constructed with church funds and dedicated in part to hosting paying guests. Smith's use of the space and the alcohol stands in stark contrast to the narrative later promoted by the institutional LDS Church, which frames Smith as adhering to a proto-word of wisdom lifestyle. This posthumous myth-making ignores documented behavior that was not only public but integral to how Smith engaged politically and socially in Nauvoo. The mansion house itself, completed in summer 1843, was originally built using tithes and donations from church members. According to historian D. Michael Quinn, it operated as a hotel and bar room despite Emma Smith's initial objections, and on December 12th, Joseph had passed an ordinance as mayor allowing the legal sale of alcohol from his residence, Mormon Hierarchy, Origins of Power, p. 119. The Nauvoo Neighbor newspaper, December 27, 1843, even advertised beer and ale from the Nauvoo brewery, further signaling the prophet's integration into the commercial and liquor economies of the town. Even among early Latter-day Saints, this mixing of prophetic authority with frontier tavern culture was troubling. William Law, once a counselor in the First Presidency and later a central figure in the dissent movement, explicitly condemned Smith's conduct, calling it a combination of political ambition, sensuality, and priestcraft. See Nauvoo Expositor, June 7, 1844. He also accused Smith of contradicting from the pulpit the very behaviors he practiced in private, referring not just to alcohol but to plural marriage and political domination. Critics outside the church were even more direct. Thomas Sharp, editor of the Warsaw Signal, wrote in 1844 that Smith presided over a theocratic aristocracy whose inner circle feasted and drank while the saints toiled. While polemical, such claims are not without merit, especially when backed by Smith's own journal. Even Joseph Jackson, another insider turned dissenter, accused Smith of maintaining revelation for public morals, indulgence for private appetites. The broader significance of this journal entry is not about a glass of wine. It is about how public moral authority was wielded amid private indulgence, and how Smith's dual role as prophet and political entrepreneur strained the internal logic of the movement he created. The bar room, staffed by Porter Rockwell, a man linked to extra-legal enforcement and accused of violence, was a powerful symbol of this dissonance. Here, Smith operated as a host, a mayor, a general, and a landlord, all while managing a theology that preached discipline and sanctity. For the historical Joseph Smith, December 1, 1843, is not an anomaly. It is part of a pattern of pragmatic compromise, one that helps explain why dissent erupted so fiercely in Nauvoo by mid-1844. It exposes a deep and widening gap between the prophetic persona constructed from the pulpit and the daily life recorded, perhaps inadvertently, by his scribes. On December 20, 1843, the Nauvoo Neighbor, a church-affiliated newspaper, published a notice directed at newly arriving Latter-day Saint emigrants, instructing them to purchase land directly from Joseph Smith, who, as the church's sole trustee in trust, held legal control over all church property. The announcement stated, "They will find it greatly to their advantage to purchase property from the trustee in trust, Joseph Smith, who may be found at either the temple recorder's office or Smith's bar room." This blunt acknowledgement that Smith was conducting official church business from a tavern inside his own home speaks volumes. It highlighted the increasingly blurred lines between Smith's spiritual office and his commercial and political ambitions. For disillusioned insiders already alarmed by secret polygamy and authoritarian control, the image of the prophet managing church land sales from behind a bar only confirmed what they feared, that the movement's founding ideals were being compromised at their source. I hope you came out learning something new. Please watch for future videos, and thank you so kindly for watching. This is the Ex-Mormon Informant signing off for the day.